I started researching the 1913 Gettysburg reunion back in 2019. Back then, I knew almost nothing about the event and was discovering everything for the very first time. So I started where most people would. I Googled my questions. And one of the questions I had was, did any black veterans attend the 1913 reunion? Now, back in 2019, when I typed that question into Google, the answer was immediate. No. Since the internet is constantly evolving, you might get a different answer now, but back then, the quote came from a very prominent Civil War historian by the name of David Blight. Here was the quote: "But the 1913 Peace Jubilee, as the organizers called it, was a Jim Crow reunion, and white supremacy might be said to have been the silent, invisible master of ceremonies." And here's the second quote, doubling down on the first. "The Peace Jubilee, as the reunion was called, was a Jim Crow reunion. There is no evidence that any black veterans attended or were welcome, in spite of what you see in episode 11 of Ken Burns' film series on the Civil War. So far as can be determined, there were no black veterans at the 1913 gathering of the Blue and the Gray. The only blacks in attendance were laborers who helped build a tent city, who constructed and cleaned the latrines, and who dispensed blankets to the white veterans." These quotes from David Blight have set the narrative about the reunion, and they are widely accepted as the baseline that blacks were unwelcome at the 1913 Gettysburg reunion. And I had no reason to question it. Why would I? David Blight has the credentials of an esteemed historian, and I'm just a simple filmmaker with a passing interest in a topic that I knew virtually nothing about. However, when I started doing my own research, I kept running into something I wasn't expecting. The newspapers around the time of the reunion supported the presence of black veterans at Gettysburg, and I'd like to share those sources with you today. First off, many 21st century historians have claimed that black vets were uninvited. They argue that if they were invited, it might upset white Southerners who might want to attend, so they are purposefully excluded from the invite. But the deeper I dug, the more I kept hearing this repeated assertion that all honorably discharged military soldiers and sailors from both the North and the South were invited to reunion, which means no one was excluded from the invitation. Now, that doesn't mean there were thousands of black veterans in attendance, but the number, as you'll see, is far from zero. From there, I found that black veterans planned to attend, and our first quote comes from the Philadelphia Inquirer. Colonel Andrew James, past commander of Post Number 30, has effected arrangements for the Pennsylvania Commission whereby all colored veterans will be quartered together at Gettysburg. All who served on land or sea should communicate with Colonel James, 1212 Christian Street, giving name, regiment, or ship with which they served in the Civil War, in order to secure transportation and reservation. The last line is interesting because it doesn't sound to me as if they were uninvited. It sounds like to me that they were expecting black veterans to show up and were making arrangements for them. From there, we go to a quote from the Evening Journal in Delaware. The Delaware party will number about 300. In the list are 12 men who fought for the Confederate side and 18 colored veterans of the Union. Men who wore the blue and men who wore the gray are to participate in the great battlefield reunion. So Delaware was sending 18 black vets to the reunion. All right, fine, so let's move on. Just for your information, for the next piece, a GAR post stands for a Grand Army of the Republic, and it was a veterans organization for Union members of the Civil War. They were similar to the American Legion and the VFW posts that exist now across the country. Anyway, the next quote lists a bunch of them. Representatives will be present from every GAR post in Brooklyn. Only ill health will prevent veterans from going. Poverty, if any of them know such a state, will be no excuse. Transportation will be provided without cost to themselves, although their families will have to pay their own car fare and other expenses if they wish to make the trip. Other posts that will be included, and then after that it lists a long list of GAR posts. You see one that says the William Lloyd Garrison, and that was a predominantly black GAR post in Brooklyn. We don't know the names of the members or how many attended, but according to the Brooklyn Citizen newspaper, they were planning on attending the reunion. From Brooklyn, we travel south to Trenton, New Jersey. Bayard and Aaron Wilkes Post, GAR, brought to camp about 40 men each, and the colored post from the Jersey Capitol has about 50 members here. From there, we go to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, to another black GAR post, 520. But this clipping has names. Members of David R. Stevens Post, 520, attending: James Otter, George Thomas, Stephen Ziegler, Cassius Mars, David Stephen, William Dixon, William White, Charles James, James Stokes, George Gibson, Mr. Brooks, and Samuel Hall. From there, we go to a Delaware newspaper called the Delaware County Times. It mentions that Walter Pyle, one of the colored veterans, started for Gettysburg Monday morning. Lewis P. Walter, another veteran who expected to accompany him, was not well enough to go. Now, a little further down that same column, it mentions George Derry, a colored veteran, started for Gettysburg Monday. Now, these just aren't anonymous numbers. They are men with names. So we've established that some black veterans were planning on attending the reunion. So let's see how many showed up. According to the Baltimore newspaper, the Evening Sun, recalling the days when they were pickaninnies, 300 colored veterans sit around the campfire at night and sing Masses in the Cold, Cold Ground and other plantation melodies. They have a company street of their own, tales of the Underground Railroad, and stirring recitals of how they returned south in blue uniforms interest those who visit them. Most of the gray-haired darkies still love their old masters and delight in telling of antebellum days on the old plantations. Now, whether the black veterans loved their masters is probably up for debate, and that's not a topic we'll be discussing here. We're just trying to establish whether black veterans were at the reunion or not. That newspaper mentions the song Masses in the Cold, Cold Ground. I'm unfamiliar with it and looked it up on the Library of Congress website. It was written in 1852 by a musician named Stephen C. Foster, and I was able to find this recording dating back to 1904. The Baltimore Evening Sun claimed that were 300 colored veterans in attendance. That number is also corroborated by a Pennsylvania newspaper called the Shippensburg Chronicle, which simply states 300 colored veterans were in camp. Moving on, the Harrisburg Telegraph from July 2nd, many of the Union camps contained some of the Negro veterans who did their little share towards keeping the succeeding states in the Union. And over in the Pennsylvania camp, some distance from the other Harrisburg post, are members from Post 520. There aren't many of them in camp, but Post 520 could hardly muster a very complete company nowadays. But the campers who are there are having the time of their lives. Now, that's the group of names that we referenced earlier. They were planning to attend, and in this clip, they are now at the Great Camp and having the time of their lives. Moving on, the Gazette, which is a Montreal newspaper, on another occasion, a Negro camp fire was found in progress. Black faces were in the majority, with a sprinkling of whites peering over their shoulders. One of the speakers made a confession of faith to the effect of, "Comrades, the Almighty made us men, but the Republican Party made us citizens." Now, the next account was published in the Twin City Star, which was an African-American newspaper published in Minneapolis, Minnesota. It ran from 1910 to 1919. The headline reads, "Negro Vets at Gettysburg. Comrade Henry Thomas Middleton called at the Star office on Wednesday. He informed us that the Minnesota veterans returned home in good health. Also, that they reported that many Negro veterans attended the reunion, and they were seen intermingling with the Union and Confederate survivors, receiving the best treatment." Now, after further research, I discovered that Henry Middleton passed away on October 3rd, 1914, a year after the reunion. His obituary states he served in the Civil War 29 months and was honorably discharged and pensioned. So, here we have a black veteran reporting to a black newspaper that many black veterans attended the Grand Reunion. Moving away from the newspaper evidence, here is some photographic evidence. It's not a lot, but it's more than nothing. This first photo is of pretty poor quality, but if you look closely at the gentleman sitting on the steps, it's a black veteran, and he seems to be hanging out with a bunch of white vets. But a more obvious example is this photo taken by the Reverend Bertram E. Brown. The original caption reads, "Contraband of War." One of these Negroes said he belonged to a man in Norfolk and the other one to one in Wayne County, and both ran away to enlist in the Federal Army. They live now in Philadelphia. What's important to note about all of this information is that they are from different locations and different sources. These reports aren't coming from a single isolated observer, but newspapers from across North America. We have sources from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, Montreal, Canada, Minneapolis, Minnesota, North Carolina, Brooklyn, New York, Baltimore, Maryland, Delaware, and Trenton, New Jersey. When I first began researching the Gettysburg Reunion, I expected to find only one or two obscure references to Black veterans. Instead, I found an open invitation for all honorably discharged veterans to attend. Black Grand Army Post organized trips to Gettysburg, and newspapers reported hundreds of Black veterans in camp. That doesn't answer every question, and we certainly don't know all their names. But I think the contemporary evidence makes one thing very difficult to deny. Black veterans were at the 1913 Gettysburg Reunion. But that discovery raises an even more interesting question. What was it like to be a Black veteran at Gettysburg? Did they feel welcomed? Did they face discrimination? What stories did they bring home? And perhaps more importantly, who were these men? Those are the questions we'll explore in the next episode. I have so much more to share about the Black veterans who went to the reunion, but these episodes take a tremendous amount of time and research before I ever sit down in front of the camera. My goal is to keep these episodes around 10 minutes a piece, so they're shorter to watch and easier to make. But each one represents dozens of hours of research. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.